Chair of the committee. Welcome to councillors, officers, members of the public, applicants, everyone, you're welcome here. And we will just start, or first of all, the safety information, I suppose, is that if there is a fire, which we aren't expecting, just walk out of this door here, or the door at the back, out to where you came in, down the ramp, and congregate by the cathedral. I think we'll just do a round of introductions for all of the committee and the officers. So as I say, I'm Rob Breyer, I'm the councillor and the chair of the committee.
I'm Jeremy Livett from Democratic Services. I'm the clerk of the meeting.
Councillor Richard Eddy.
Councillor Ellie Freeman.
Councillor Shabalala.
Councillor Serena Wilson. I'm banished to the back row because I've got a slight cold.
Councillor Andrew Varney.
Councillor Lisa Durston.
Councillor Katja Hörnchen.
Do you mind? Patrick Boxwell, Planning Officer.
I'm Jonathan Diamond from Development Management.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Can we go to agenda item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Wells. Councillor Shabalala is substituting.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. This is to note any interest relevant to the consideration of items on the agenda. Any councillors got any declarations of interest to make? No. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on 5th of November 2025. This is to agree the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Do I have agreement on that, councillors? Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Katya. That's helpful. I will just sign these now. And moving on to agenda item 5, which is the action sheet. We're requested to note any outstanding actions listed on the rolling action sheet for DCA committee, or PCA committee as it is now. Obviously, there's nothing on the action sheet, but as I say every time, it's good to have it there just in case we need to take any actions. Agenda item 6 is appeals. This is to note appeals lodged, imminent public inquiries and appeals awaiting decision. Richard, I think you've got something you'd like to ask or say.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 46 and 47, 267 Hotwas Road. I'm pleased to see, Jonathan, the appeals were dismissed, but costs were awarded against us. Could you explain why?
Yes, so these appeals relate to the refusal of planning permission and listed building consent. So there were 2 appeals being considered by the inspectorate. In both cases, the appeals were dismissed. However, in relation to the costs decision, the inspector found that the local planning authority had behaved unreasonably and awarded a partial award of costs. This was just in relation to some of the reasons for refusal. It appears there was an unfortunate processing error on this one where amended plans were accepted, and the inspector found that there were discrepancies then between what had been set out within the report on the application and the decision notice. So they considered that really sort of flowing from that, there were inaccuracies and felt, unfortunately, that a partial award of costs was justified, albeit the appeals were dismissed.
Any other comments on appeals at this point or questions? Nope. Okay, well, we will note those and we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is enforcement. This is to note recent enforcement notices. Has anyone got anything they'd like to raise on this item today? No. Okay, we will note those as well, and we will move on to public forum. So usually public forum is, and it is in this case, taken ahead of each application as we receive it. So we also have some general questions for public forum which we'll take now. So I'm wondering if the questioner Lex Morley is here. Is Lex Morley here? No. Okay. I think they requested to speak, but they haven't ended up turning up. That's fine. We will put the answers to those questions. I think we've already given answers to questions in writing for those questions that have been submitted. So we will move on, and we'll move on to the first application, which is Barrow Court, 1 Barrow Road. The first thing to do is to take those public forum statements. So I will just give you 1 minute, and I would like to keep to 1 minute today just because we have a lot to get through this evening. Just for you to summarise your statement and bring to attention what you think the committee needs to hear mostly. Because, yes, sorry, I'm looking between two lists. So Jeremy's rightly pointing out that I should look at this list only. So I think, first of all, we have Councillor Yassin Mohamud to speak to your statement. You've got 1 minute, Yassin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just summarise. I haven't got any objection for this application. As fellow councillors, as a ward councillor, I fully support for this application. And one of the reasons I'm supporting is like the development will generate an underused brownfield site currently has some significant and social behaviour problems, which fails to create environmental with our residents feel safe and secure. The scheme will also deliver new housing, including much needed 3-bedroom family houses, as well as nearly 40 affordable homes. I welcome the proposal. Use almost third-party, 2/3 of the site publicly owned, including the new green landscape plaza and middle site, open to all. And also the main issue I'm supporting for this, as mentioned earlier, was antisocial behaviour and drug dealing issues going at the moment. And the area was like a dead zone area. So I will support this, and also my co-councillor is supporting. We have some issues regarding about the light issues of the residents already complained when the planning goes, and the officers confirmed that this will not affect the light about the height of the building. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Yassin. We'll move on to A3, which is George Bafo-Jan. Is George here? You've got 1 minute. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm George Bafo-Jan, Galliard's Bristol-based head of land. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Mahmood for his support. We propose to redevelop this former industrial site with 390 new homes for rent, including 3-bedroom terraced houses and affordable homes, along with new community space. Just a few minutes walk to Lawrence Hill Station, the site is extremely well connected for local services, public transport and cycle routes. Excluding the 39 affordable homes, we will contribute 2.2 million in SIL. The Council's viability report concluded we could only deliver 7% affordable housing on site at the equivalent to LHA rent. We are offering 10%. There are objections, mainly from customers of the neighbouring climbing centre, concerned they may lose some on-street parking. We've agreed to pay £100,000 towards a residents' parking zone, which might be the best solution for the actual local residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go on to A4, which is Lee War. You've got 1 minute, Lee. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. We are the Bristol architects who have spent the past 4 years refining this high-quality scheme which also respects existing neighbours. The site already sits near a number of existing taller buildings. Along with 2 rows of terraced houses, we are proposing 3 buildings between 8 and 16 stories. We have located these 5 different blocks carefully, so the new terrace rows are sited closest to the existing houses. We have pulled the apartment buildings as far back from the existing homes, so they are now between 25 and 100 metres away. We've also located a public plaza between the existing homes and new apartment buildings, and reduced the height of 2 proposed buildings 1 by 5 metres. The daylight sunlight report concludes that all neighbouring properties will retain acceptable levels of natural light. This is an extremely high quality and appropriate redevelopment of this highly sustainable brownfield site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. The next statement is A5 from Sian Smith. Sian, you've got 1 minute.
Good evening, councillors. I'm one of the architects. This is an underused brownfield site with extensive tarmac car parking, which currently suffers from significant antisocial behaviour. Our scheme seeks to transform it into a green, vibrant and safe place for new and existing residents. 2/3 of the site will become high-quality public realm. A new step-free route for pedestrians and cyclists would run through the site, helping better connect with Lawrence Hill Station, nearby facilities and the city centre. We are also proposing 2 new pedestrian and cycle links through the existing perimeter wall, so the neighbourhood becomes more permeable. With hundreds of residents living in the new homes and a new community space, the redevelopment will contribute significantly to making this a much safer environment. With growing spaces, extensive tree planting and heat network connection, this will be a highly sustainable and lovely place to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That does conclude public forum, I think, for this item. And we will move on to the officer presentation so we can get an idea of this application. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So this is the first item being brought before members and relates to the redevelopment of the site, including demolition works, to provide 390 residential dwelling units, build to rent, including access improvements, landscaping and public realm works. Just to give a quick overview of the site, it's a relatively large site. It's located at the head of Barrow Road in Lawrence Hill, with existing ramped pedestrian access at the top of the site and vehicle access from Barrow Road at the bottom of the site to the south. It's worth pointing out here that the existing layout shows a fairly irregular shape to the site, and it is currently occupied by padel courts with a large area of parking. The site has a number of physical and policy constraints around it especially. Just to point out to members, along this northwest portion of the site, there is the Bristol to Bath cycle path, which is also a safeguarded area by Network Rail. Next to it is a safeguarded area by Network Rail as a former rail track that's currently not in use. That former rail track is also an SNCI. To the northeast of the site, there is a group of residential terraces, Hemmings Parade, Tenby Street, and Brentry Avenue, just located here. And then to the east of the site is Gauntham Park. And a small portion of the site in the south is still within the Barrow Road principal industrial warehousing area. And then to the southwest of the site is St Philip's Causeway. It should be noted, though, that there are a number of benefits to developing this site. It is considered to be underutilised currently. It's a previously developed site and therefore brownfield land. It's right on the very edge of the designated by policy city centre area, and it's also very close, as you can see, to the Lawrence Hill local centre, and it's within a 5-minute walk of the train station there. The site is also within an emerging regeneration area in the emerging local plan, where city centre level of density will be sought, as well as tall buildings where appropriate. And this is just a very quick overview, satellite view for members to give you an idea of the area around the site. And then moving on to the proposed layout, the development would consist of 5 blocks, and going anti-clockwise from the south, Block A would be 8 stories. Blocks B and C would be 2 short terraces, 2 stories with private gardens. These are family-sized dwellings. And then moving anti-clockwise, Block D would be 9 stories, adjoining Block E, which is a mixture of 16 and 9 stories. And the breakdown of units would be 222 one-bedroom, 154 two-bedroom, and 14 three-bedroom units. Moving on to the landscape layout, there would be a social spine which would run through the centre of the development, and this would include play space and community garden space, growing space in the north of the site. It would also be heavily landscaped, soft landscaping, which would achieve a 32.5% biodiversity net gain uplift beyond existing levels, which is well in excess of the current 10% requirement. A quick note on the improvements to connectivity across the site. These probably aren't that clear. However, full details would be secured by condition, but the applicant has agreed to create a new pedestrian access to Gauntham Park. a new level, these are equalities compliant, access to Tenby Street. And owing to the issues with Network Rail owned land, they can't deliver at this time a new access onto the Bristol Bath cycle path. However, an area would be safeguarded for its future creation as and when that would be possible. Looking to the right as well, as noted by people in the public forum, there would be an area safeguarded within a residential parking scheme to safeguard residents from the additional parking pressures, well, any additional parking pressures that may arise. Moving on, I'll just take you through the site with some render views of the scheme. This is from the south, from entering the site from Barrow Road. This is block A on the right and block E, the higher block, on the left. Then looking over an aerial view over St Philip's Causeway to give you an idea of scale and massing. Blocks D on the left, E in the centre, and block A on the right. And then again, across this sort of social spine element that's been created in the design work, you can see block E in the centre, block D on the right, and the terraces in the foreground here, which is blocks B and C. And then this gives you an idea of the general setting of the buildings and their sort of scale in relation to surrounding development. As you can see, there is a general sort of spine developing alongside proposals of denser, flattered development running parallel to St Philip's Causeway and Lawrence Hill Roundabout. Moving to response from residents, 113 objections were originally received. A very large majority of these were owing to parking pressures on the surrounding area, or the perception that there would be unacceptable levels of that. And so, yeah, that's the bulk of those objections, but not all of them. There was a considerable amount of objections from surrounding residents about the heightened massing of the buildings and their impact on their amenity. There was also concern raised about the arrangement of affordable units being in one block, and there was notes made about how much this scheme would would contribute to local amenities and need in the community. A reconsultation was undertaken in November, and 18 objections were received. Again, the primary areas of concern were the density and intensity of development and impact on neighbouring amenity, and parking and community facilities. I should just quickly point out that revisions to proposals were undertaken. There was an alteration to the affordable housing offering. It was originally to be a dedicated block for a housing association, Block A, as you enter the site. However, no one came forward. There was no takers for that proposal, and therefore it had to be amended as that wasn't feasible. So a reworked scheme offers 10% on-site provision, 39 units, in accordance with LHA maximum levels and capped at that level for future open market use. Agreement for the new accesses was made in terms of the access to Gauntham Park and to Tenby Street, and a safeguarded future access to the cycle path. Balconies were included, 35 projecting and 25 Juliet, to Block D, to improve the living standards, provide some private amenity space and add visual interest to the buildings. And there was a reduction in the number of parking spaces to 29, and this was in order to optimise the active use of the northern part of the site, which is quite problematic, and this is justified through the creation of the residents' parking scheme to safeguard surrounding residents in terms of parking pressures. I'll just quickly read out these word for word, if that's okay. Officer conclusions. The site presents significant physical constraints, but falls within a highly sustainable edge of city centre location, close to a designated local centre and the Lawrence Hill train station. The site represents previously developed land and is located within an emerging regeneration area where a city centre density will be encouraged. New links will be created across the site and existing accesses improved to increase connectivity and permeability as far as practicable. Officers acknowledge that the proposals would have a discernible impact on a number of surrounding houses to Kingsmarsh Way and Tenby Street in terms of daylight and sunlight levels based on BRE guidance. This impact is weighed in the planning balance and found to be acceptable on balance overall. Proposals do incorporate a high ratio of smaller single aspect units, showing some conflict with policy. However, these would meet space standards and flats would be served by internal and external shared amenity spaces. All units would enjoy high-quality public realm, incorporating soft landscaping, play space and gardening provision. A 10% affordable housing commitment will be delivered on the site, which is found to be proportionate with what is deemed to be viable by external assessors and would translate to 39 units. Owing to the shortfall in delivering a 5-year housing land supply, officers must apply the presumption in favour of sustainable development triggered by the NPPF. In this instance, it is concluded that the benefits which would flow from optimising the development of an underutilised site outweigh the impacts identified. All other relevant planning matters have been addressed in the officer report. Officers recommend approval, with members asked to delegate this back to officers to finalise conditions, and the 106 agreement should approval be forthcoming.
Thank you, Patrick. I just wanted to correct your correction right at the beginning. You said Bristol Bath Railway Path, and I think that is correct, actually, because obviously if you're a pedestrian, you don't want it to just be seen as a cycle path. But yes, thank you for that. That's really helpful. I've already got a hand there from Andrew. Go ahead, and then Zoe, and then Katya.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I was going to make the same correction, actually, Rob, about the Bristol Bath Railway Path, but there we go. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, regarding the 10% affordable element, is that now going to be dispersed across the entire range of buildings, or is it still going to be down to one block, Block A?
Pass you over to Jim quickly, if that's okay. Obligations Officer.
Yeah. Hi there, Councillor Varney. It would be dispersed. That's with the way that build to rent works. They will be dispersed throughout the blocks, and they may not even remain the same units all the time. So they could be interchangeable between 1 and 2 bedroom units, but it will not be a set block. No, they will be indistinguishable from the open market blocks in all shapes and form.
No, that sounds very good. Tenure blind is what we
that's sort of
see,
word,
isn't it? So very good. The other question I want to ask was about the high proportion of single aspect dwellings, which obviously is not desirable. So I'm just wondering what mitigations have been put in place to prevent south-facing units from overheating in the summer and north-facing units from having a lack of direct or much daylight.
Yeah, I think as noted in the report, this application is a balance between achieving higher densities of development, which is important in terms of our housing shortfall, and achieving high quality of living environments as far as possible. In areas where we want to achieve high density of development, single aspect is fairly common, especially with taller buildings. In terms of overheating, we are seeking further information by condition. However, the flattered units would be mechanically heated. They would also have hookup to the district heat system, so the sustainability benefits are there. Mechanically cooled and air conditioned. We also did get secure balconies and Juliet balconies to increase natural ventilation. That was part of the reason that we requested those in some of the units. In terms of the sort of the large number of single aspect units, this has been noted from the beginning of proposals, that even at pre-app stage. But in terms of delivering a viable development and really optimising the high quality redevelopment of that site, unfortunately we have had to accept that there will be quite a few single aspect units.
Yeah, it's reassuring to hear there will be some mechanical cooling element, because obviously we have a summer like we did earlier this year, that's going to be unbearable. But yeah, thank you for informing me about that. Thank you.
Okay, Zoe.
Thank you. So I'm aware this is not necessarily a material consideration, but one of the objections that I read was talking about the strain on, public services nearby. I'm aware that, because there is no replacing of businesses here or a reduction in employment in the area, it's not a material consideration. However, I would be interested to hear about, what's being done to, hopefully manage the amount of strain on, the local NHS, dentists, post office, and things like that.
Oh, am I on? Yeah, I think that's a difficult one. It's the NHS aren't actually a statutory consultee, and so in this instance, they haven't been consulted. I think that I could ask Jim to talk about contributions for those services potentially, if necessary. But in terms of this development, what has been offered is some community space in the ground floor of the development and a meeting room, I believe. I think that that's, in terms of sort of other benefits to the community, they do flow from having a new community being built on an underutilised site. And I think that that's a key element to regenerating the area and adding value. Yeah, I'm not sure if there are any other comments on that one, but yeah.
I would just add, through the local plan review process, there has been a policy advanced which identifies this area for regeneration. So sort of through that process, sort of this has been established, and as part of that there are proposals to de-designate the site in terms of its current industrial and warehousing use. So that's sort of set out in the report, but it's kind of again sort of that background that this proposal is coming forward.
Thank you.
Katja, you were next, I think. And I'll come to Serena next.
My question would be along similar lines. Thank you for bringing this presentation. It does look quite exciting because that is quite an unloved area of Bristol. I cycle past there quite a lot. And yeah, so that should help with some of the area being lived in again and being used and probably make it safer, actually. One of the questions that I had, though, was we had a letter, not particularly on this particular planning, from the ICB, questioning about the fact that the local doctors in that area, don't have this floor space to take any more patients. It wasn't particularly for this building. I will agree with that one. It was for a later proposal that we have coming to the planning meeting tonight. But as this is the same area and it'll be the same issue, I'm very worried. We had this toing and froing with the ICB where they completely ignored us for years and years, and now they're suddenly getting interested in helping with planning and realizing that they'll be building a lot of buildings and that something needs to be done. So I'm wondering how we can, with this particular one and any other one that's coming in the future, that we make sure that each one of these buildings offers something to help put better services, especially health services, because that's a very poor area, that area.
I think that's a really good point that you raise, and I have actually discussed it with colleagues in terms of how that process is going to take shape going forward. There isn't a clear answer for that right now, as far as I'm aware. If I can pass over to Jim, the obligations manager, he can talk more sort of fluently on it.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Hospital pass. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Hornston. The ICB have, in recent months and years, started to quite regularly now seek contributions for health provision. And we're not unsympathetic to them. The difficulty at the moment that we have, and I think there is probably an end solution to this, which I'll come to in a moment, is that the ICB acknowledge that in the area in which this application and the two that are being considered later on this evening sit, they have no plans to expand capacity in their existing surgeries, and they have no plan in place to provide a new surgery anywhere at this moment in time. So really they're making an ask for money without really any idea as to what they're going to do with it. And that's where the difficulty that we have lies. If, for example, they had an allocated site, or a site that they said, this is in our capital programme to be built between 2028 and 2030 to serve these new communities, it would be a much stronger case for seeking an obligation. But they're not really in that place at the moment. And our concern, I think, as much as anything, is A, there's potential for failing the regulatory tests, and B, that they're asking for substantial sums, which is perhaps understandable. But if we were to say, OK, we'll make a contribution to you of whatever amount it happens to be, a few £100,000, and the result of that is we get less affordable housing, and then they're unable to spend that few £100,000, and the developer asks for it back at the end of 5 or 8 years, we're in a bit of a lose-lose situation. But where we are looking to make headway, and it's something that senior officers and the ICB are discussing, is potentially to be taking some sort of a paper through the committee process, not the development, not the planning committee, but the strategy and resources committee process, to consider whether it might be appropriate to make some sort of an annual allocation of strategic SIL to the ICB that they could call on it as and when they have schemes that they wish to deliver. Because this scheme and the other two schemes that are coming before you this evening will all make contributions of in excess of £2 million worth of SIL. Other schemes around the city are paying SIL. We're collecting SIL all the time. And SIL is there to provide for infrastructure to support the growth of the city. So I think that is probably the most likely approach that we will end up with regarding the ICB is in looking to have some sort of a strategic SIL-based approach that they could draw down on as and when schemes come forward. But at the moment, we don't feel we're really in a strong position, or that it's particularly wise to be seeking contributions from them in the absence of a clear plan on their part as to what they want to do.
Thank you for that. That does make it clear. Can I ask a supplementary? Just what I wanted to know is how do we keep the pressure up to make sure that there are doctors' offices and that we don't end up in a situation where there's an emergency and people don't have enough facilities? Bearing in mind these are the first 3 schemes coming, there's a lot more schemes coming. So is there some way we can facilitate this or ask the right questions at health and scrutiny?
It's probably not one for this committee, because obviously this is a regulatory committee dealing with planning applications, but it is certainly something that the Director of Economy of Place is working on at the moment, and is engaging with chairs of some of the regulatory of the other committees. So I think it is something that is looking to be moved forward.
Because talking to people in all wards, all of us probably do, the number 2 reason for people not wanting developments in their area, the first one's traffic, the second one's healthcare, because they're already waiting for doctor's appointments and can't get them. And they're thinking, I'm going to have another 300 people here. So,
okay, I think we need to move on. Serena, you had your hand up next. Yes, to be clear, we're still on questions at the moment.
Yes, I'm just adding to Andrew's point, really, about the single aspect units, but in addition to that, I am concerned about the quality of living, quality of accommodation for this development, and I'm wondering how close Block D will be to St Philip's Causeway. It looks like it will be fairly close. I note that air quality and noise isn't necessarily a concern, but I just wondered if you could go into that in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Yeah. First things first, Block E is very close to St Philip's Causeway. However, the ground floor use to Block E will be handed over to amenity space, perhaps some community space and plant space. There would be a reasonable outlook from the actual apartments in Block E. Yes, it would be over the causeway. I imagined that there would be appropriate insulation given the pollution control officer didn't have any objection to proposals on grounds of noise impact. As noted previously, officers have acknowledged and added into the planning balance about the single aspect unit nature of this site, but given it's so sustainable for higher density of development, this layout has been found to be, following quite an exhaustive pre-app process as well, the best layout in terms of achieving high quality living space and also avoiding too many impacts from to surrounding residents as a result of the scale and massing of proposals.
Just to add to that briefly, if I may, there are conditions that could be imposed just to ensure that we secure appropriate mitigation measures in relation to noise.
Thanks. Zoe, I note your hand. I'll come to you in a second. I'm going to ask a question now, if that's all right. I just wanted to ask about the residents' parking scheme. I think one of the things that would assuage community concerns would be, like, if we can do it, a condition that says that the residents' parking scheme will be in place before tenants start living on the site. Now, I know that there are, provisions within the contracts for all of the new tenants for this development that says that they basically can't, have a residents' parking scheme permit. But I think that might assuage some of the concerns. Is that something, an option that's open to us, or is that impossible to say that?
New to this. It's unlikely, to be honest. Residents' parking schemes have to go through considerable consultation. It would be outside of this process. So it wouldn't necessarily be satisfied that that can actually be implemented. I've seen some potential objection. It would be the best solution to parking issues. A backup solution could be providing junction protection and safety measures, and then that would satisfy everything that we needed to address in terms of the severity, in terms of safety. But it's very unlikely that we would be able to condition that would be able to go through, that would have to go through.
So, in essence, they're giving £100,000 for something that may happen at what point? It could happen at any point. We don't know that. We can't guarantee that.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. So there's no absolute guarantee that a residence parking scheme will be in place. We do have the funding to be able to move it forward and deliver it, and we have the aspiration certainly to do that in order to protect the residents from the impact of parking. But as I say, if we didn't achieve that sort of permit scheme, we would certainly have to address any sort of safety concerns that arose from higher levels of parking.
And if they did give that contribution of 100k, how long would we be able to use that for that purpose, if you see what I mean? Is there a particular amount of time that elapses? Back to Jim.
Right, yeah. So that will be in a Section 106 agreement, and generally a Section 106 agreement is exactly that, an agreement. The norm, the clawback term or the spend by date, the norm is 5 years after the monies have been spent, monies have been received by the authority. It does not have to be that. It could be 3 years, 8 years, 10 years, depending upon whether the applicant is prepared to agree to an alternative timescale. There could be no timescale. The council wouldn't insist on a spend by timescale. So it's really a matter for both parties to agree. But a date would most likely go into the agreement, but it would be 5 years would be the norm, but it wouldn't have to be that.
Thank you. That helps. Just what on S106, and I will come to you, Zoe, is I have heard that it might be quite a good use of S106 to look at the play park equipment in Gauntsham Park as a local thing. That's just a note, really. Zoe and then Lisa, if that's right.
So I know that we don't really have a lot of images about what the inside of the apartments will look like, and in particular with the single occupancy flats, do we know what the square footage of those is? I'm not sure if I've missed it within the paperwork.
I think they're 46 square meters, and they're not studio units. They're separated into bedroom, kitchen, lounge, and bathroom, from memory. I can show you some layouts if you like.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
While you're getting those up, can I take the next question? Because it might take a little while. Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I just have a question about the safety, or the sort of perception of safety within the public realm elements of the development. Obviously, the regeneration itself will create more of a sense of safety, and there'll be more people around, but particularly at night, and thinking about how people feel moving around that area. What kind of engagement or consultation has been done or can be done to kind of ensure that those spaces feel safe for people? And how can that be balanced? So also thinking about lighting, balancing that with the fact that it borders onto an SNCI as well.
Yeah, so there is a lighting scheme as part of the landscaping proposals. Actually, the northern area of the site was found to be quite a troublesome area of the site in general, because as you can see on the plan form, it tapers up to a point, and there's quite a high sort of ramp at one side, and then you're also hemmed in on the other side by the cycle path. This was originally quite a large area of car parking space only, and it was decided that was in design and character, in living terms, that was a negative space. And so that is one of the main reasons that we negotiated down the number of parking spaces in order to provide further communal gardening space as a positive area of space, and there would be a lighting scheme through the development. The pedestrian accesses would be improved and added to. Obviously there are constraints to the site, that is acknowledged, but I think the layout plans are quite positive in terms of providing for safe spaces to move through. I think you made another point about the SNCI.
Just, am I right that it kind of the boundary of the site is on an SNCI, so can that have an impact on the type of lighting, for example?
Yeah, I think from memory, again, that was discussed with the ecology officer, who ultimately came back and was satisfied with proposals. I think that the substantial gains in green infrastructure on sites, helped to sort of mitigate for some of the impact of the building so close to the SNCI, but that was assessed and determined to be acceptable overall.
Just to add as well, if I may, just on the issues of sort of safety, we have consulted with the Crime Reduction Unit at the Avon and Somerset Police, and they provided a response and given advice regarding sort of best practice in relation to access and CCTV, for example, also sort of securing lockers for deliveries, and they note in their response that the applicant has stated that they will further liaise with the CRU in order to develop a safety and security strategy, which is encouraged. So that's the Crime Reduction Unit.
Okay, I've slightly lost track of where I've got to, but I think it might be Richard next, is it? Yes, go on.
Mine is not a question to officers, but merely an attempt to be helpful in respect for your question, Chairman. This committee certainly sought to actually see whether we could condition residents' parking schemes in respect of Bedminster Green and various other schemes over a number of years. But unfortunately, for the same reason the officer has said, we can't do that. Now, of course, we've moved from mayoral authority to a committee model, but it still sits in the lap of the Transport and Connectivity Committee, and we can't condition it.
Thanks. I am also on that committee, so obviously I can take that up in that with that hat on. Anyone else got any questions of clarification that they want to ask? I've got, I think, one more, which is a fairly minor one, which was I probably just didn't get to it. There were 300 pages. I'm sorry, but is there a stepped access up to Hemmings Parade, or is it a level access from basically from Church Road, Lawrence Hill area down to the site? Or is it?
It's from Hemmings Parade. It's a ramped access down. Yeah.
Not stepped.
No, I don't believe so. I think it's ramped all the way.
Okay.
I think with improvements, I think it will be ramped all the way. There are certainly going to be qualities compliant accesses as well onto Tenby Street and onto Gauntsham Park as well.
Okay. Last chance for questions of clarification, and we're going to move on to the debate. Oh yes, quite right. So Zoe asked about the typical layout. Is there anything you want to comment on there, Patrick? On?
Is it possible we can get that zoomed in a bit? Just 'cause...
It's a little bit small to be able to see. Oh, there we go.
So yes, these are the units. As I noted, they comply with space standards. We can't really control what they do with the internal spaces, in terms of you talking about what they will look like, so to speak. But I'm quite confident they would be of modern standard and high quality standard overall. However, in planning terms, they meet our requirements. So yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the debate. And is it a really important question and clarification?
Where do you do the laundry?
I think that would be within the shared amenity spaces. There might be in integrated as well. I'm not sure. I think there are a large area of shared amenity space and plant space and all sorts of space in the lower internal areas on the ground floor.
Huge improvement for British housing.
bit of maybe outside critique there. That's fine. Okay, so should we move on to the debate? Has anyone got anything they'd like to say? Richard, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
To me, Chairman, this is very much a no-brainer. We have here a classically underutilised brownfield site, often sadly prey to ASB and crime, of course, and with very limited community use. We have an applicant who's came forward with an imaginative scheme to build 390 houses. many of them larger 3-bedroom and 10% affordable housing. I must say it is a long time, if ever, where I've heard a developer come forward and offer more than we've said is necessarily from their viability assessment. So that's a plus for me, of course. We also have major transport improvements, significant, as we've heard from Jim Sill, contributions, and the offer of working with the local community and providing accessible local facilities. There are 2/3 of the site will be public realm improved, which to me is incredibly good news. What is there not to like? It does seem to be a no-brainer. And on top of that, clearly the applicant has consulted well with the local groups and the ward councillors who are here to actually endorse the scheme. So it has my complete approval.
Thank you, Richard. Sibs, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think for my first planning committee, I'm quite enthused by seeing such an application. I think it's not just the application, but it's actually the world that developers are going through to make something work for the city. However, I'm a bit conflicted and probably more towards the support of the officers here in terms of a response in one way or another. It seems like we are looking for more than one can offer. You know, I'm looking at the affordable housing, the silk contribution, the contribution to the resident parking zone. You know, all of these things sounds like, you know, developers are trying to entice Bristol residents, planning regulations with everything that they can to make the developments be more worthy to be approved. But equally, it puts them at a jeopardy of, can these schemes actually be delivered or not? And I think one of the things that you mentioned was, this is an emerging regeneration area. Is that correct? Okay. Meaning that there potentially isn't as much SPDs that kind of sit within this area. There hasn't been a very strong neighborhood plan that really looks at the whole breadth of what Lawrence Hill can offer in terms of future development within it. Is that correct? Okay. So we could kind of see this as a beacon of hope, but we could also see it as a trigger in terms of what next would you like to ask from developers that come through to want to meet the needs of the residents within Barton Hill and those that would like to be moving to Barton Hill in terms of, you know, the needs from Bristol. I think we are pulling developers on many arms, and sitting on this side, I feel I'm hopeful for the residents, I'm hopeful for planning, but I'm a little bit uncertain about the future of development in Bristol. We've seen the viability, task and finish groups. Some of these have been challenging times. You know, Bristol is the 7th most expensive city to develop in. And how quick do you expect development? And we're also looking at safety regulations. You know, we've got these buildings are more than six stories. So they're going to go through safety regs. That may delay them. That may have further cost implications. So in the face of it, and in the spirit of developers that are trying to engage and do more than what is asked of them, I support this application, and also to support my councillor colleague. In his support, I support it, but also in terms of what the city is looking for, in terms of what Lawrence Hill is looking for, this is an example of what this future regeneration area can have. But we hope for more 3 beds. In one way or another. We hope for more. Thank you.
Thank you, Sibs. Anyone got anything? Oh, okay, everyone's gone straight away. I looked that way first, but Ellie's not spoken yet, so I'll go Ellie, then Zoe, then Serena.
I think it's fairly short compared to what other people have said. I think I am largely supportive of this for the reasons that that both people have said so far. I do think it'd be helpful to look at what conditions we can apply, because I think the question about that walking route and the link onto the cycle path, I know that it's sort of out of everybody's hands at the moment, but it'd be really good to have something in there to make sure that does get looked at. And I think that NHS question as well, and the pressure on local infrastructure. And I don't know whether there's any other conditions, but that's one of the things that's always really helpful, as you know, with anybody with any sort of slight worries, is just making sure we've got those conditions really clear. So if we can go through that at some point.
Okay, so that's the particular ask, isn't it? So in terms of the condition around NHS, it sounds like that's not really what we want to do, actually, because I think from what we've said, it's actually a wider conversation. But on the, it's completely gone from my head. What was the other thing you said? Oh, the walking route, yes. So be more specific, please. What are you asking about?
It's a tricky one. I suppose I just don't want it to be lost over time, because at the moment, as I understand it, they're trying to get that access, and it's just not, Network Rail are not giving it. But you know, is there a way we can just make sure that sort of stays in the mix and doesn't get lost over time?
Yeah, I'm fairly sure that wouldn't. I'm not sure we can do that as a condition. I don't know what the. Is there a way that we can make a strong representation to say that that's the thing we are? I mean, I feel quite strongly about that. That it's a real missed opportunity not to have that link to the Bristol and Bath Railway path.
Do you mind me? Right, we had extensive conversations about this with the applicant over quite a long period of time. That land is Network Rail land, and right now they do not want anyone touching it. However, the applicant was absolutely amenable to the idea that we can legally safeguard some land on the site to be given over to access as and when that may change, and conditions from transport would recommend that be secured as well as part of any approval.
I think that's what we're going to have to end up with. Okay, Zoe and then Serena.
Thank you. I will be supporting this application. As you know, we have a huge housing crisis at the moment in Bristol, so the number of homes that this will provide will be hugely beneficial towards easing that. At the moment, Bristol is the second most expensive place to live in the UK. We do not have the best of transport systems. We don't have an underground. We don't have, a thriving NHS system here. So I think it should always be, taken with a pinch of salt that when we are building large, especially vertical developments, that it will put strain on local communities. And I'm very, very grateful to the applicant for their SIL funding for the 10% affordable homes and, their commitment to working with residents. I think that I think asking developers to contribute to communities is not too much of an ask for a city that is often quite often struggling to survive.
Thank you. Serena.
I want to echo people's hope and spread a little bit of Christmas good cheer. I do have my reservations about some aspects of this application, in particular the design. I can't help wondering if this is the housing that we need, these are the homes we need in that area. We need family housing. I'm not sure that high-rise, one-bed, single-aspect units do the trick. I also worry about the high-rise aspect of it. I went and visited the other day, actually, on a Sunday. Now, it was dark and quite rainy. It does seem quite a constrained and cut-off site, and I hope that will change things and improve it, because I feel that walking along St Philip's Causeway and into town, into the city centre, is quite a big ask. However, I'm going to be an optimist, I'm going to be hopeful, and I'm going to support this application, but I do have reservations generally about the quality of design we're seeing in the city and the way it's quite homogenous at the moment. But on the other hand, we desperately need new homes.
Thank you. I'm going to say a few things now if there's no hands going up. So the things that I noted, it's noted in the papers that Kingsmarsh House and Bainton House nearby are about 11 to 13 stories. This goes up 16. It would have been nice to have kind of kept with the sort of precedent of the area, but I can see why, for viability reasons, that isn't probably possible. As I mentioned earlier, I think using the Section 106 agreement to look at the local infrastructure. I, go to Gauntstown Park with my kids, and it is needing an upgrade, so that kind of thing is quite important. As we've said, it's frustrating that there's not that access, but I think we've gone over that to the Bristol and Bath Railway path, that is. What else have I got here? That's the sort of things that I think leave a little bit to be desired, but I do think there's some really strong... the one other thing I would mention is it is worrying that social housing providers weren't willing to invest, and I think that a good deal has been arrived at. I think you've got to a good point with it, but I think that's just something to note, that it is worrying that is not something that is worth... They don't feel that they can invest in it, or they're not able to invest in it. There was one more thing that was a bit of an issue, which I noted that it's not quite as compliant as it could be around accessibility and wheelchair accessible units. You do have 2%, but I think the emerging policy is 10%. So that's a little bit disappointing, but you're compliant with policy. So the things that I really like the incidental play space, I really like the growing space, and obviously that's been changed as a result of feedback, so that's good to see the applicant sort of changing plans in light of community feedback. I like the hiddenness of the parking. I think I like the way you've done the Grove and kind of made that a little bit less sort of visible. And I obviously like the proposal for an RPS, and I hope it happens, but it sounds like it's a bit more up in the air than just contributing the money and then it happening. I support the principal development in this place, definitely, and also the specifics of the scheme. I think it is a decent scheme. It does provide an awful lot of housing in an area of need, and that's got to be supported. So, anyone else got any other comments? Yep. Sibs?
Yes, you just raised my eyebrow on that one, because I think it's worth understanding better why housing providers wouldn't take the offer. One that I could only think of is about the regulator, but that will just be me speculating. Because it is an opportunity nonetheless, especially to provide that certainty of affordable housing. Yeah. So was there any clear reasoning of why that's taken place, or in terms of this opportunity, or not?
I think it is an important question. Is it all right to just take that question? Is there anything you can say about that, or back to Jim? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Breyer. I'll give you a quick answer, but I can also refer to page 45 of your committee papers, where I have sort of tried to cover that off. But basically, social housing providers at the moment are in a bit of a bind. They have, in the light of recent court judgments and cases, been compelled, in effect, to spend a large amount of their own capital on improving their existing stock. There were cases recently about some poor young child who died because they lived in a very mouldy house. And housing associations are putting money into improving their own stock, which would have previously been used to buy Section 106 stock. They are also, post-Grenfell, very reticent about any tall buildings. Anything over 4 stories, at the moment, they're not really interested in. So they'll happily take units or houses in lower density suburban developments, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to get willingness from social housing providers to take inner city blocks or to be interested in it, partly because they're deploying their resources elsewhere, and partly because of the regulatory issues that have increased significantly through the building regulation process post-Grenfell Tower.
Okay, I think we do need to move on, and we do need to go to the vote. I think we've got to the point where everyone's spoken, and we have a time for questions. So as I usually do, I'm going to go around in a random order, which I've randomised just to take your vote. Just say whether you're... sorry, first of all, I'm going to move the recommendation that the officers have made to grant. Richard has seconded, unsurprisingly. And so we will move to the vote on that. So just say whether you're for or against the officer recommendation to grant this planning application. So first of all, Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Varney.
For.
Councillor Breyer, that's me. For. Councillor Ralston.
For.
Councillor Shabalala.
For.
Councillor Peat.
For.
Councillor Durston.
For.
And Councillor Hornshin.
For.
So that is granted unanimously. We're going to take a 5-minute break until 7:05. So please come back at 7:05 for the next application. Thank you for that. Welcome back to Planning Committee A. We're going to go to the next application, which is Crown Sawmills, Freedom Gateway. And we're going to take the public forum for this item. First of all is B1, Councillor Yassin Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair, again. As a local councillor, I'm still supporting this application. This site has a huge applications, huge potential to help revitalize an area which is currently hugely underused and neglected, makes good use and unsightly from gateway regeneration. The platform Crown scheme is a sustainable location, and comments has been received so far with the local residents and businesses are supportive. And also there's 300 new homes, including number of 3-bedroom family homes, 20% affordable local housing allowance rents, 15 letters support, 3 objections. And I'm going to support again this application. And also I want to remind everyone as a committee member, I hate every committee I'm coming to this chamber that you're asking about the health services of the Lawrence Hill, these applications. As you know, there's potential applications coming the next future. So what I can confirm to you is we have at the moment capacity with the Lawrence Hill Health Centre, Wellspring Health Centre, and also the Temple Quarter. There will be new GB coming soon. So hopefully that also will cover the health issues regarding the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Yassin. That's appreciated. The next one is B3, Matt Wilcock. Is Matt here? Yeah, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Platform's been bringing build-to-rent sites forward across the UK for over 10 years now, both as a developer and as an operator. We're really pleased to be investing in the Frome Gateway area. It's a vital regeneration site for Bristol. The 352 homes will be targeted at the mid-market, and we're bringing forward 20% affordable housing at LHA rates. Other benefits will include 1,300 construction jobs, 50 permanent jobs, a new Riverside Park, a new road, new cycleway, 2 million in SIL monies, and there'll be $1 million per annum generated in council tax. The scheme also has very strong sustainability credentials with a 374% biodiversity net gain, and it will be very cycle focused. With 20% affordable housing, though, the scheme is very much on a knife edge in terms of viability. So I really hope that this will be taken into consideration in the closing out of the 106. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. Moving on to B4, which is Jason Ramlagon.
Good evening, councillors. Our team at Bristol-based architects, Alford Hall, Monaghan Morris, has extensive experience working in the city. As the master planner for the Frome Gateway Spatial Regeneration Framework, we know this redevelopment will absolutely fulfil the framework's aspirations. The proposal will transform this former timber yard, where public access to the river has been blocked for more than 100 years, into a vibrant community of lovely homes and flexible workspaces sat alongside a new Riverside Park. 2/3 of the site will become public realm. The new park will be a haven for wildlife with 64 new trees, areas for play and relaxation for the whole community. All 3-bedroom family apartments are dual aspect with fantastic views over the Riverside Park and the newly extended pedestrian and cycle-friendly James Street. With varied heights and a distinct palette of materials, this will be a very dynamic building and an excellent kickstart to this really important regeneration area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. The next one is B5, Heidi Abido.
Is that working? Yeah. Greetings, councillors. My name's Hadi Abido. I run the grassroots music venue down the road called the Jam Jar. It's a stone's throw from the site. We're really excited to see this scheme come forward. I've lived and worked in the area for 12 years, and it has our full support. I am also really pleased that the developers have been really supportive of our current operations, allowing us to run meanwhile events in the site. We've had more than 4,000 people come through and listen to music on the site, and we are working with them on a proposal to bring forward some community and cultural space within the scheme, the finished scheme, when it gets through, guys. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hadi. And the final one is B6, Stephen Wickham.
Thank you. The last Civic Society letter of 8th December still has a few points in it. The proposed development fails to comply with the local draft plan policy DS5 and the Froome Gateway Spatial Regeneration Framework, or follow guidance given in the Urban Living SPD. The proposed buildings are too high and too much accommodation is being crammed into the site purely to achieve the model that works for the applicant. The development should be restricted to a maximum of 250 dwellings and be no higher than 7 or 9 stories amplified height. There's no valid reason for a contextually tall 19-story building. The application fails to consider and integrate the implications of flooding into the proposals fully. As currently proposed, the development is unsafe. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. That concludes the public forum for this item. We're just going to go over to Charlotte for the, what am I trying to say? Officer presentation, that's it.
Thank you. I believe members have received a copy of the presentation, so I won't dwell on every slide. Thank you. Next slide. So the application is within Lawrence Hill Ward, between the M32 and Pennywell Road. It borders the River Froome to the south of Riverside Park and Peel Street open space. Adjacent to the site are the locally listed buildings, Globe House, Vestry Hall and the Malt House. Globe House has approval for redevelopment up to 6 stories, and the Alide hire site adjacent is proposed for redevelopment also, and the next item on the agenda today. The proposal is for demolition of all buildings on the site. It would introduce a new highway link between the existing James Street and Eugene Street. 40% of the site lies within the Old Market Neighbourhood Development Plan area. The site is within the Bristol Central Area Plan boundary also. It's currently designated as being within a protected industrial area. However, the Froome Gateway Regeneration Framework proposes a move to a mixed-use neighbourhood. Next slide, please. Above are a number of site photos. On the left, you can see the river frontage, and in the centre right, James Street at the top, and the existing Eugene Street access in the lower right photo. The red brick building at the top right is Globe House, already mentioned. Next slide, please. The Froome Gateway Regeneration Framework, endorsed by Bristol's Cabinet in February 2024, governs the transformation of the area with its key regeneration objectives, including at least 1,000 new homes in this area, improved community and green space, and a restored River Froome, climate resilient development, and more diverse job opportunities. Next slide, please. The regeneration framework will be delivered through the emerging policy DS5. While not adopted yet, this is at an advanced stage and is a material consideration. The key parts of the policy relevant to this application are set out above and at page 75 of the report. And in particular, this highlights the need to take a coordinated approach to sites. Next page. As referred to in the public statements, the framework also sets out an initial concept exploration for a green space move through a BCC land swap, shown in the right-hand image there. The idea was to create open space in the areas at highest risk of flooding. However, at this time, this option has not been further progressed. It's true to say that this came about at the time of the framework inception and prior to the applicants taking on the application site, and the current application must be considered on its own merits. More detailed guidance is also given within the framework according to defined character areas shown on the left of the image. This plan also proposed a small new park at the southern end of the application site. You can probably just see in that image there. However, for reasons I'll touch on in a moment, the proposal has evolved to instead bring forward a park area along the riverside frontage. Next slide, please. The key considerations influencing site development include, in terms of constraints, a strategic sewer running beneath the site, which cannot be built over and requires an easement. That's the red arrow on the plan. The site is also wholly within flood zone 3 at high risk of flooding. You can see the blue line outline on that plan. In addition, the Environment Agency requires access for maintenance vehicles to the river. Opportunities identified by the framework that the proposal would meet are safeguarding land for pedestrian cycle bridge connection, a link to James Street, improving connections through the area, including to the riverside, and a riverside walkway and improved connection to the river. Next slide, please. The proposed layout addresses these constraints and opportunities and comprises 70% public open space. The proposed riverside park area, shown in the plan here, would enhance amenity and ecology and provide a riverside walkway and Environment Agency access. The space would be fronted onto by the proposed community space in Block D. That's the smaller block adjacent to the river, with other active employment uses shown in blue above along the river frontage and James Street. The green spaces shown on that plan are the residential lobbies with plant rooms in dark grey, and light grey is cycle and refuse stores. The proposal also includes a connection through the site to the riverside, and potentially that could join up with other forthcoming development leading to Pennywell Road. The proposal is for 352 homes of build-to-rent tenure, comprising a mix of sizes with 20% affordable housing of affordable private rent tenure and 10% wheelchair accessible adaptable homes. The housing mix is considered acceptable by officers as set out in the report, and this provision is a significant benefit of the scheme. Next slide, please. In terms of the appearance, the proposal takes the form of 4 main blocks connected by lower scale link blocks to break up the massing, varying heights, shown with the tallest element at 20 stories. Next slide. The above shows an artist's impression from Wellington Road, in particular showing the proposed brick colour variation. These are artist's impressions, and decisions should be taken based principally on proposed plans in addition. Updates to the scheme during the course of the application were minor and centred on changes to Block D, including the window arrangement, balconies and brick colour from a dark grey to red. That's the smallest block in the image. Next slide, please. Above is a further artist's impression from Wellington Road, showing a pedestrian level perspective from the bridge. The bridge crossing across the river does not form part of the application. However, it's important to note that the application would contribute land to the access to the potential bridge, and in order to make construction possible. The feasibility of the bridge is currently being explored. In terms of the public consultation process, this is summarised above and at page 12 of the report. Key objections were to height and flooding, as you've heard, and in support, comments were regarding investment in the area and the well-designed homes and green space, with further details on the amendment sheet of the full comments of the Bristol Tree Forum and the Civic Society. Turning to key considerations, these are reviewed in full in the report. For the purpose of the presentation, I'm going to review the matters of height and flooding in more detail. Overall, the scheme is considered to be a quality and contextually appropriate design. However, as it is a tall building, further detailed consideration is needed. The above image is taken from the framework and sets out considerations around height and scale of development. It does identify if you can see on that image, the yellow areas are areas of amplified height. So that would be, in this context, considered to be around 9 stories. So this does go beyond that, but it's not prescriptive, and it does set further guidance that new developments would be expected to demonstrate detailed contextual analysis, microclimate analysis, and analysis of views with sensitivity towards heritage assets. Sorry, bear with me a second. So the analysis carried out includes formal townscape visual heritage impact assessment to assess impacts on the listed buildings shown above in red and grey. Conservation areas are the black outline, and other heritage assets. There has been some technical debate over the methodology of the view production, which the applicant has responded to. However, it is advised that when considering the closer range views, these should not be relied upon in reaching a judgment, and to exercise some caution in considering these. However, officers consider this doesn't materially affect the recommendation. The views have been confirmed as being acceptable by the urban design team, bearing this in mind, and I'll refer to the difference between these and the longer range views in a moment. Next slide, please. So I'll just run through a number of views. These are closer range views, and you can see that the proposal's been fully rendered. The orange outline shows the Alide higher proposal at the time of the application, but this has now since been updated. And blue is the Globe House approval. There are no concerns about visual impacts on these views. These are further close range views. On the left, the proposal is fully rendered, and there has been a change in brick colour of block D. On the right, the proposal is shown in pink as a wireframe only. Again, there are no officer concerns regarding these views. A number of closer range views from around Pennywell Road, with view 17 from towards Old Market. Again, a wireframe in pink, if you can just see beyond the trees. Again, no officer concerns in this regard. Next, please. This is the final set of closer range views I'll be presenting. This shows Portland Square in relation to the Grade 1 listed St Paul's Church and the listed buildings next to St Paul's Park. Worth noting, these are winter views, so the trees aren't in leaf. And on the right, the proposal shown again in pink, with the already approved development in blue. These particular ones are more sensitive, taking into account the listed buildings, but that, again, there are no officer objections overall, taking a cautious approach, bearing in mind the previous comments. Page 27 of the report refers in further detail. Moving on to the longer range views, there is no debate over the following views in terms of the methodology of the image composition. The above view from Cabot Tower with the development in pink shows relatively lesser impact than already consented Debenhams and Premier Inn schemes in blue. The above view shows the proposal fully rendered. You can see to the left of the church spire there, the tower. This is a view from Kingsdown. This is a more sensitive view, but again, there are no objections overall. Next, please. This view 30, also from Kingsdown, shows again the proposal in pink wireframe, slightly to the side and behind St Paul's Church spire, noting that obviously the wireframe does make it more prominent because of the colour. This view shows the greatest impact in the view of officers and is noted. This is given considerable weight, but still concluded to constitute less than substantial harm that should be weighed against the public benefits of the scheme, as at page 27 of the report. And the final view I'm going to present is, again, worth noting, a winter view. It's the view from Nine Tree Hill. Overall, there's no objection from officers on these impacts. And in conclusion, the proposal has followed the guidance of the framework to carry out thorough visual impact assessment and is being demonstrated to be acceptable for a taller building in terms of visual impact, with other considerations of microclimate being considered within the report. Turning to flood risk set out at page 40 of the report, since the completion of the report, the Environment Agency has provided a number of clarifications set out in full above, which officers are required to update members on. I won't go through these in detail, but members have received a copy of the presentation, and importantly to note, the above are any technical clarifications and do not change the recommendations of the report. In summary, on flood risk, officers have been liaising with the applicant and the Environment Agency in detail over whether the level of flood risk for the site can be addressed. While the sequential test element has been passed, addressing the other aspects has required further detailed modelling to show the off-site impacts and final flood depths affecting access routes. The application proposes to mitigate its impact on flood risk through a water entry strategy, as shown above by the spaces in dark blue, which would mean that cycle stores and refuse stores would be allowed to flood during flood events to accommodate water that would be otherwise displaced elsewhere. The Environment Agency has indicated acceptance of this approach, subject to the LPA confirmation that this is accepted to be safe. These spaces, in particular the cycle stores, include internal escape stairs and mezzanines to mitigate safety issues. Further detailed modelling aims to show the impact on flood routes. Essentially, a final response is needed from the Environment Agency, and these technical matters do require further consideration, and hence officers are seeking that they be delegated to officers to consider further, while seeking the decision of members on all other matters. We do have our flood risk manager with us today if you have any further comments on this. Next one, please. So, in concluding remarks, in view of the Council's housing land supply, the NPPF requires a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless there's a clear reason for refusal based on protected assets. In this case, that would be heritage assets. And in the view of officers, this wouldn't be a reason for refusal. The second part of that being whether any adverse impacts of granting consent would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So just in the final slide to conclude, the summary above provides an overview of the main sort of shortcomings or key impacts of the proposal versus key planning benefits, also summarised at page 55 of the report. In particular, the proposal is for build-to-rent homes on brownfield land, making more efficient use of land in a sustainable location, providing policy-compliant, affordable and accessible homes which carry substantial weight. This proposal also makes significant public realm provision. So in the view of officers, the planning benefits would clearly outweigh the adverse impacts and would achieve the delivery of the framework objectives. So just to reiterate, that officers would be seeking delegated authority for approval of the application subject to resolution of flood risk, also subject to drafting conditions and section 106 matters outlined within the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. That's very helpful. I'd just like to say thank you for the sort of balanced way that this has been presented, and also in the papers, seeing the sort of shortcomings of any scheme, which every scheme has shortcomings, it's not deniable, so it's good to see that. Zoe first, and I think Serena, questions?
Thank you. So my question is about whether or not we could restrict the use of ground floor apartments, so they're not for like residential spaces, just to mitigate any potential loss to people who would live there if there was a flood.
Yeah, sorry, it probably doesn't, because the flood risk sort of key issue is quite complex. It probably doesn't spell it out clearly, but there isn't any ground floor residential uses, because that wouldn't be acceptable in flood risk terms. So it's all raised up above that.
Thanks, Zoe. Serena.
On flood risk, I do have some concerns about it, and it may be, again, it's very complex, I may not have understood it properly, but to me it seems that this is still a key safety risk, and that the EA, Environment Agency, hasn't quite signed off or come back with final comments. That was my first question, if I answered that correctly. Secondly, I am worried about the use of basement storage space for bikes and bins as a mitigation flood area, if I've understood that correctly. Again, I can't help thinking about what happened in Valencia, I think only last year, where such spaces were used in a flood situation and people sadly lost their lives. As representatives of residents of this city, I think we have to be very clear on this safety risk. That we're not just rubber stamping something that in 50 years' time, whatever, we might get questioned on, and quite rightly so scrutinised, because, you know, as we all know, with climate change, flood risk is going to increase. There is a heightened danger.
Yeah, thank you. I think, we can all agree that it's, a serious issue. I think the main thing to say would be that, this has sort of gone through a lot of discussion and with the Environment Agency and a sort of a lot of scrutiny in this issue. It's not necessarily the sort of standard approach, but what we have to consider is also what the alternatives would be. So in this case, it would be raising the whole scheme above flood levels and providing voids beneath the building, and that does have implications for the public realm, and the fact that you'd need ramps all around the site, or internal ramps within spaces that would really make the ground floor spaces undeliverable or unviable. But the other point about regeneration is that because I think the presentation has outlined that the site's highly constrained and it's delivering a lot of other things, and particularly that sewer easement, means that there isn't much space to provide a lot of ramps all around the exterior of the site to provide a raised up level. But I think coming back to the point about safety, because that's the critical policy test, is that there is outlined within the report the flood warnings and the fact that there is several hours flood warning for the site. It's a managed site, 24/7 managed, and these spaces have had built within them escape stairs and mezzanines to mitigate the risk to safety. So I think in the case of Valencia, it was sadly the sort of basement car parks that were, a particular issue. So this has sort of borne that in mind and designed into the scheme sort of methods of escape and being able to escape floodwaters. But even so, we wouldn't anticipate that to be a problem given flood warnings, and that the site would be managed and have its own evacuation management plan. But we do have our flood risk manager with us if there's anything more specific. I think just on the point about the Environment Agency, it is worth mentioning that they have a specific role, and that our local flood risk management team have more the role of safety and things like access and evacuation from sites. So there is a distinction, and our flood risk manager isn't objecting to the proposals. This is part of the reason we feel that these matters can be taken forward under delegated powers to resolve. Thank you.
If I could just come back really quickly, I would feel as committee members that we weren't doing our job properly if we didn't scrutinise those comments once they came back from the Environment Agency, if I'm to be fair. I think this is a significant safety issue. I don't know how we go about that, Chair. I've thrown a spanner in the works, but I would like them to come back in some shape or form.
I think I would like to understand. I mean, we've had I just want to mention a previous committee where we had some transport issues that hadn't been resolved before committee. and then we sort of used a function where we check and sign us off through the chair. Is that appropriate in this case, or do we feel, is it felt, I mean, I'm really after what committee members think on this, because I think that this hasn't quite got to the point, it feels like, where I don't feel confident in it, in the sense of like, I'd quite like us to have absolute sort of clarity from what the Environmental Agency have said. So have we got that clarity, or can we add any more clarity around that?
Yeah, so we've got a comment from Simone Wilding here.
So it's something that we have been negotiating with the Environment Agency for a very long time, and where, due to the slowness of that progress, but where we had been given the impression that we were getting to a resolution, and therefore the belief that we can take it to committee. We have had a similar situation, by the way, before. Squeaky panel, sorry. Where we did exactly the same thing with Baltic Wharf, for example, where just the Environment Agency matter was then delegated to officers to resolve. But in this particular case, I think, like Charlotte has already explained, the matter that's actually still under debate is the part of the flooding matters that is in the local authorities' control. And so I think if Matthew can maybe say a few words, he's our flooding manager, and where I think we're definitely in this very final process of getting it lifted. It just didn't seem justified to delay even further in because, you know, it's been recognised before here tonight about the desperate urgency, and therefore we need to make sure we bring schemes to the committee as quickly as possible.
Did you have anything to say, Matthew, on it?
Yeah, I can add a couple of points, I guess. So on the matter of bikes and bin stores, the reason why they've been designed to flood during design flood conditions is so to mitigate the impact of the development on flood risk elsewhere. And so on a sort of what we could say a volume for volume kind of comparison, whereby we look at the amount of space that we've got pre-development and we look at the space of floodable space that we've got post-development, we actually achieve a betterment in flood risk terms from the development. But the nuance comes in that although there may be more space, the routing of that flood water might change. And so the remaining matter with the Environment Agency is to look at that and see exactly how that flood water is routed, which might result in some design, very minor design changes to, for example, the way that the bins are orientated and things like this. So that's the matter on bins and bike storage areas. And then the other flood risk matter is around, the ability to safely access and escape from the building during design flood conditions. And that's something that the Environment Agency tends to delegate to the local authority, because the Environment Agency's role during a flood event is to warn and inform and not to respond. The response is with the local authority, coordinating with the blue lights. So that's where sort of my team comes in. And we've determined that, although there is a period of time potentially in future during design flood conditions whereby you would be unable to safely access and escape from the building, the sequence of events to lead up to that scenario is significantly slight to lead to the conclusion that the development is safe in flood risk terms. You can't eliminate flooding altogether. All you can do is put in place a series of measures to make it appropriately safe, which I think that this development has achieved.
Okay, I've had 3 hands, but can I just stick on flood risk? So if there's a flood risk question, okay, you were first, Andrew, so you can go first, and then we'll come back to Richard.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to understand a bit more about the nature of the flood risk in that area. So we're not talking about flash flooding because of the way the river is managed, is that correct? So if there is going to be a flooding event, there will always be plenty of warning, and people will then be able to remove bicycles and bins and that kind of thing. We don't want to see bikes and bins floating down the River Froome, for example. So is it the case, am I right, is that the case, that there will always be warning of a flood event? It won't be a flash flood, which we saw in Valencia, for example.
It's a really good point, and one that's important to understand. So while we can never guarantee that there'll be a warning for a flood event, we can always know that there will be warning signs, so to speak. So human error might kick in, which means that the Environment Agency, for whatever reason, don't issue a timely flood warning. But there will nevertheless be flood warning signs, because this is not a flashy catchment. This is a catchment that extends well up into South Gloucestershire and takes around about 48 hours to respond to rainfall before the peak of the flood hits Bristol. So yeah, you're quite right. It's not a flashy catchment, and there would be lead-in times to kind of inform that response. And the draft flood warning and evacuation management plan that is to be secured by condition acknowledges that, and some of the response is based around the fact that upon the onset of flooding of the site, so between the time at which there's flooding of the site and the time at which you are facing unsafe conditions, there's around about 3 hours to respond. And if you add on to that the sort of normal flood warning time that you'd expect to get from the Environment Agency for around about 3 hours, that's a good 6 hours that you've got to respond, on top of which, of course, you've got weather that's been around and people being alert to that as well. So yeah, you're quite right the way you've described that.
Yeah, so just a flippant comment, but if you've got an electric bike, maybe don't leave it in the bike store, your battery will fail. So there we go.
Richard, is your comment about flood risk or question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to endorse the Chief Planner's comments. In my experience, over at least 10 years, probably much more than that, we've delegated these matters with confidence to the planners to look at, investigate, scrutinise and sign off in consultation with the Environment Agency. As Sibs has said, I join him on the Development Viability Working Group, and there are major obstacles to the viability of construction in Bristol. And we know one of those, not all of those, but one of those is delays caused in the system by statutory consultees like the EA. And, you know, it would be, in my view, without predetermining my view, better to determine this planning application and delegate any remaining flooding issues to the officers.
Thank you. Sibs, you had your hand up a minute ago. Are you still wanting to speak or not? Yeah. Was your question about flooding? We're going to stick on that until we finished it, if you see what I mean. Another one about flooding. Okay, so we'll go Zoe and then Lisa. Now I would like to draw the flood risk aspect to a close.
So I am personally in very much favour of this proposal, and I very much enjoyed hearing from Heidi about how it already seems to be, bringing the community together. And I think for myself and perhaps for other councillors, the one thing that's really scary for us is if we were to vote for this application, what are the chances that there is flooding and that there is a loss of life because we voted for it? So essentially what we want is for you to assuage our worries on that, is what is the risk that this could, if granted, lead to a loss of life?
I think that question has already been answered to a large extent. I think both Simone and, I've already forgotten your name, Matthew, is it? Yeah, I've already clarified that that's the case. So I don't think we need to answer that. Lisa, yours isn't. Okay, so we'll go Sibs and then Lisa.
Thank you. I feel like I'm not talking about flooding after that. No problem. So you mentioned that there should be, or you have been doing some coordination between this development and the next development coming. Is that correct?
Yes, well, the applicants have spent a long time liaising with other developers, both the consented scheme at Globe House, the Alide hire scheme that's next on the agenda, and another scheme that's coming forward at Pennywell Road. Mm-hmm. And that's been coordinated by the council's regeneration team, who's sort of helped those conversations take place.
So can you explain if there is a joint impact assessment from all the developments that you bring forward to say, when these go forward, this is how we think the impact would be, as opposed to them having individual impact assessment statements?
Well, I think in terms of environmental impact assessment, that's a sort of separate application process, and each scheme has gone through environmental impact assessment screening, which is where you determine is an environmental impact assessment needed, and that also includes consideration of whether, you know, cumulatively together schemes need to be considered. So that process happens normally before the planning application submission and has taken place individually, but does consider cumulative impacts.
Okay, does consider that. Okay.
Sorry, did you want to?
Sorry, Charlotte. Yeah. Just to add, if I may, in terms of the assessment of the applications, obviously those are assessed individually on their own merits, but obviously we have neighbouring sites where there are live applications, so those have been sort of factored in, and you know the relationship of those sort of with each other has been a key part of the assessment of those each individual applications.
Okay, so we've got the individual assessment. Although you've considered the joint impact, you are not presenting what could be the joint impact, you're just showing the individual impact. Yeah? Okay, that's fine. On the application here, there's a number of things that are mentioned as failed to comply, like with the regen framework and so forth. Now, it may be failed to comply because of what's there, even with the Old Market neighborhood plan. It may be failed to comply because of what the community had designed in its own scheme to say this is what they would like to see. Yeah. My question here is: has the Froome Gateway framework been exposed to under ambition by the developers actually having a higher ambition, and therefore it's then deemed that they've failed to comply?
I think is what you're asking, that because the scheme goes, it's taller and it's sort of larger.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't think the framework isn't prescriptive. So it's guidance. And as I talked about to do with heights, it's not a sort of set standard. It's really a sort of starting point as to how those 1,000 homes could be accommodated in the area, but looking at what sort of the starting point would be. Excuse me. But yeah, so first of all, it's not prescriptive, but there will be sort of ongoing work looking at, you know, maybe in a sort of next step to the framework in terms of, you know, what needs to be looked at, and because development is coming forward at sort of perhaps greater densities that's originally envisaged. But I think the main thing for this application is this application can be assessed on its own merits in terms of the framework, and for officers we consider that this scheme does comply with the framework and delivers really most of the objectives that the framework is seeking for sites like this, and that it's, you know, a good scheme and a positive thing.
And this is more outside the development, but just really thinking about the framework, yeah, because the framework is kind of a guide, as you're saying. It's a gesture of what would be the aspiration within that regeneration area. So would that be at some point at a review, so that it can really think about what benchmark is it setting? Because clearly the level that was set has been broken. Let's put it like that. So would you review it again to say, well, for the next developments, should something come forward, this is how far we think, you know, could be good imagination. Yeah. I just want to test how far are we thinking that some of these guidance are, because here's a development that's gone way over your expectation. So how much are you putting your expectation? Does this say that your expectation was low, or does this say that you need to think wider? I just want to get a framework.
I think as well, just to add, there is some work that's just begun on looking at an addendum to the framework, which may kind of address some of those things. But also just to mention, in terms of the local plan review process as well, there is a policy there, policy DS5, which relates to the Froome Gateway, and again, in a similar way to the last application, but it's recognised through that process as a regeneration area that sets out a number of aims and aspirations, and again, in terms of the proposal before us, it meets those.
It meets them. Thank you.
Okay, I think Lisa, you were next, weren't you?
Thank you. In the report, there is a comment from the police designing out crime officer, which feels a little bit unresolved to me, where they point at, sorry, I'm just trying to find it, where they point out the site is within a high crime area. The site will be managed with staff security and proposes CCTV, and that the proposed link route between St James's Street and the Riverside is a potential area of concern. Because of the size of the area enclosing that is a challenge, so a management plan is required to kind of manage the security. I'm just wondering what that might look like, and just to kind of ensure that that's really built in from the start, rather than potentially reacting later to problems that arise.
Yeah, I think as we've heard with the previous scheme as well, it's a sort of a management plan is quite a sort of standard thing for these schemes of larger scale. And particularly also conditions that might ask for further details of the security, CCTV and lighting. So in particular for this scheme and the previous scheme that were both built to rent, they are also managed sites 24/7. So they're actually sort of built and then operated. And obviously these operators have significant experience in the market of managing these sites. But as you say, it would be a case of trying to look at things from the start in order to design things to the best specification and management systems to avoid problems. But that is a sort of standard approach for these sort of larger schemes and sites.
Okay, I've got a quick question. I think I need to acknowledge that in the previous application in this committee, people might be watching these on YouTube and you might see these separately, but we did have a substantial discussion around health, and I think that also applies to this. Now, I don't want to relitigate what was said in that discussion because we've all been given a very clear answer, but I do think it's worth broaching that, of course, we've had this public forum statement and a statement sent to us where it's being asked that £500,000 is being requested to ensure health infrastructure can be provided. Just a response on that, really. Maybe just to reiterate what we've said earlier, would do it. I just want that to be on the public record, if you see what I mean, for this application as well as the previous one.
Right, yeah, and I wish I just recorded what I said
Yeah,
before,
sorry,
because I won't
but
be able to say the same thing again, will I? It'll come out differently. So, where we are really with the ICB is we're not unsympathetic to their plight, and they are clear that all the doctors' surgeries in this part of the world are oversubscribed, and that development in this part of the world will add stress onto their services. The difficulty we've got at the moment is that they don't really have distinct plans as to what they want to do. They know they've got a problem, but they've identified in their letter on this particular application that there are no plans to increase capacity at any of the existing surgeries, and at this moment in time they don't have a plan for where they want to put a new surgery. So in effect the issue we've got is that they're asking for money to do something with as yet unknown, and that potentially causes a little bit of a conflict with the SIL regulations, which set out how you can use planning obligations. It also potentially causes us a little bit of an issue as a planning department, because what we don't want to be doing is potentially agreeing to large contributions. In this case, I think it's 520,000 that's been asked for, something along those lines, which may then result in a reduction in the amount of affordable housing that's able to be provided. We then collect the contribution, only to find that the NHS or the ICB are unable to spend it within the agreed timescale, and we end up having to give it back, and therefore it's a bit of a lose-lose because we've lost out on some affordable housing and we've not been able to deliver, or the ICB haven't been able to deliver anything with the Section 106 money. But I think moving forward, there's work going on elsewhere in the council, certainly with the Director of Economy of Place and some of the chairs of the committees are looking at potentially thinking about whether a more appropriate route for funding primary care facilities delivered by the ICB, maybe through some sort of an annual strategic SIL allocation, just such that the council agreed that X 100,000 or X million pounds per year was nominally allocated to the ICB, and then as and when they came up with a scheme to deliver primary care capacity improvements, that funding could be drawn down. So I think that's probably the route that is likely to be the most practical solution to deal with the acknowledged difficulties that the ICB have with their capacity.
Thank you for your patience in clarifying that. That was, I think, useful, even if we'd heard it. I hate to say it, but you might be back again for the third one to say something maybe shorter but similar. Does anyone else have any more questions of clarification? Yeah, Katya.
The one thing I wanted clarification of, I think it's on page 62. It says, and it's to do with the health centres and the things. It's to develop the rise in detrimental conditions health for residents such as acceptable. It says because the design and development creates accessible opportunities and they're going to have healthy lifestyles and active transport and that. I'm quite sure that is much more healthy, but I don't think that's a good reason not to build on the NHS. I think it's that I was a bit disturbed by that paragraph. It's on page 162.
Have you got a question? What's your question?
I just wanted to say, well...
Okay. Maybe we'll take that as the start of the debate then. Does anyone have any questions left? No? Okay, so we will move on to the debate. So does anyone want to speak in the debate? Rich, you've got your hand up straight away. And then Serena.
In my view, there are many reasons to vote for this mixed scheme. I mean, for example, there are community benefits, the cafe, flexible business and employment use, of major leisure improvements through the Riverside Park, etc. Significant £2 million of SIL. We've talked about health and other issues. But I'm going to restrain myself purely to housing. In the previous debate, Councillor Zoe Peat spoke movingly and, in my view, correctly about the present housing crisis in Bristol. Conversely, we heard from the public forum Stephen Wickham from the Civic Society criticising the scheme and suggesting something like 200 dwellings might be more appropriate. Can I respectfully remind members the present Bristol local plan envisage us to deliver 33,000 new dwellings? In my view, that's very challenging, but it is a deliverable task. The Labour government have conjured up a figure of £67,000 for 67,000 dwellings. I think that's bonkers, but there we are. But if we are to achieve what we have set out, we actually need to increase density of brownfield, non-greenfield sites, and this is just appropriate. And it achieves that. Not only does it achieve that with over 350 dwellings, but it allows the applicant to actually provide 20% affordable housing. That's twice the previous scheme we've just approved. So I urge you, as I will, to support this scheme. I am satisfied with the flooding considerations, and we're delegating that appropriately to officers to sort out. But please back this.
Thank you, Richard. I have Serena, Andrew, then Sibs. Serena first.
Yes, thank you very much for the clarification on flooding. I am reassured, especially on the flash flooding issue, because after Valencia, I think a lot of us were very concerned about that. So that's great, and I'm happy with that. I think there's an awful lot to admire and applaud about this application. There are many good things. I mean, BREEAM Standard of Excellence is fantastic. The Riverside Park, it was very moving and encouraging to hear from Jam Jar, so thank you for coming to speak. That was great. Great news having a community space, because too often we've seen developments in the past, especially in other cities, where music venues have been threatened by new development, but this is actually a supportive application for that, so that's fantastic. Also, I have to say, which is going to be difficult when I come to the next application, that this isn't PBSA, which for me is quite joyous, sorry. So I'm very happy about that as well. And then I'm hugely encouraged by the workspace, so that's double height workspace as I understand it, which will be make space as well. That's terrific. So I will be supporting the application. There is one proviso though, and you won't be surprised to hear me say this, other committee members, which is about design. I think we have to be careful not to always put quantity over quality. We've got to have a balance there. We need to look at design aspects because we have a legacy to look after in this city. We need to learn from mistakes of the 60s when we had a lot of high-rises which didn't quite work out. People didn't want to live in them. So if we mustn't let Bristol become a high-rise city when it's actually a low-rise city, becoming a high-rise city by default, we've got to look out for that and make sure we always demand the best. And also, there is a slight issue in the back of my mind about having a framework like Froome Gateway, where I know it's not meant to be prescriptive, but you do have advice in there on height and not really sticking to it. So those would be my points. But in the main, I think this is a good application. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Andrew, Sibs, and then Lisa.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Charlotte, for the presentation as well. I won't list all the benefits that Serena and Richard have just highlighted. I agree with all of those. I'm really keen to see the Froome Gateway scheme sort of kick-started, and I don't want to delay it, and I'm really delighted this scheme has come along. It's the first scheme in this area, and it deserves our support. You know, it's delivering a huge number of houses, the still benefits. I thought I was going to list all the benefits, there I am. But, and the Riverside Park, I think, is going to be a real bonus for local people to be able to walk along the park, and hopefully with the other schemes, they will link up together, be a fantastic new asset for Bristol. So I'm really pleased to see this scheme come forward. Lots of benefits, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got Sibs and then Lisa.
Yes, I support this scheme because it's actually delivering something that I was hoping we could have delivered. You know, about 6 months ago, a resident gave me a call and was struggling because they had just been moved, they had just been offered temporary accommodation. No, sorry, they had just been offered fixed accommodation in a wheelchair accessible home. They'd been on the waiting list for almost 4 years, and for every offer that they'd received, they'd always reject it because it was not suitable for their disability. I then checked our team and our housing officers to understand what is our offer of wheelchair accessible homes, and it was less than 3%. So this development offers 35 wheelchair-enabled units. And because wheelchair-enabled units are larger, it's compromised the 3 beds and the 2 beds. But what it's actually offered is it's offered accessibility to 35 residents that normally have not had something built with that intention. So for me, just that alone is something that we have not been able to deliver for years. And I'm so happy I'd like to meet these 35 residents. But this is exciting.
Thank you, Sibs. Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just sort of echo some of those comments, really. I also really liked the number of accessible family units in this application. The 20% affordable at LHA rates, really pleased to see that coming forward, the regeneration of the Riverside. I think the height aspect, my concern over that would be more around the impact of climate as the climate gets hotter and the sort of heat impact of that. But in terms of height, I think that's whether we like height or not is quite subjective. And so anything that gives us 20% affordable housing at this state, given the state of the housing crisis in our city, I really welcome, and I will be supporting this.
Okay, I'm just going to riff on what you just said, which is I agree that height is subjective. What I do always struggle with these kind of applications is when we have set a specific. I mean, it is guidance. Obviously, it's not got the status of the local plan, but I feel like the integrity of our planning system is in having good guidance and then sticking to it. And I think we too often have a case where we set a particular expectation and the reality of what happens, and that's down to all number of factors. It's a complex and complicated thing for anyone to navigate, officers, applicants, whoever. It does strike me as undermining the planning system continually when we have something that is described as being an area of amplified height, for instance 9 stories, buildings that are modestly higher than that prevailing building height are agreed to within the spatial regeneration framework, and then we've gone, and it's 20 stories, ends up being 20 stories. It doesn't compute, because we just need to make sure that there's a level at which we are listening. It's kind of exactly what Sib has already said earlier in the discussion. I only want to just echo what everyone else has said. Is a really good development. I look at it and I try to pick holes in it, but I'm struggling. I actually wrote a series of superlatives for each bit, but I won't do that bit because it's a bit cheesy. It's kind of the things that I really liked about it: a play space. I always think that's a really important thing to have within any scheme, informal or otherwise. Cycle maintenance hub. That plan is a great idea for that area. I know from lived experience living quite nearby that it's quite hard to get a bike fixed in that area. There are a few places you can go, but not many, and I think the demand is there. The Riverside Walkway landscaping, it's not quite sort of the Free the Froome campaign, but we are getting there, and I think that's really good. And yeah, community space and cafe. I mean, there's not really anything that I could look at and go, we don't want that in a community, we don't want that in a new development. So yeah, the issues with flood risk, I think, are going to be resolved, hopefully. And other than that point about height, I think I can't do anything but support this. Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Chair, just very quickly, just aware of the time. Do we have to finish by 9 o'clock? Or can we extend?
No.
Okay, all right. But I don't want to stay that much longer, so...
No, that's fine. I'm trying to get through it. Thank you for your
So let's get on
intervention.
with
It's
it.
delayed us about 5 seconds. So I think we should probably, at this stage, move to the vote on this. So let's first of all... Oh, Zoe's going to second the officer recommendation, which is what I was going to put forward. Is that what you're saying, yeah? Yeah, okay, and so we will move to the vote. Bear with me 1 second. And we'll go around, and if you just say whether you're in favour or against the officer recommendation. First of all, Councillor Varney.
4.
Councillor Hornchin.
4.
Councillor Eddy.
4.
Councillor Ralston.
4.
Councillor Durston.
4.
Councillor Freeman.
4.
Councillor Shabalala.
Must be Christmas. 4.
Councillor Breyer, that's me, 4, and Councillor Pete.
4.
Again, unanimous. Thank you very much. Given Councillor Varney's comments, can we have a 5-minute break and be back at 8:18, please? 8:18. Take the next application, which is Alide Higher Surface Little George Street. We are going to take the public forum to begin with. So as before, you have about 1 minute. Please try to stick to it because we'd like to go home fairly soon. At some point, you know. So the first one is from, again, Councillor Yassin Mohammed. Go ahead, Yassin.
Thank you, Chair.
For the fun time.
Really started out short. Okay, so likewise, part of From Gateway, this developer also participated fully in that process and has worked really collaboratively with offices, including region team. The site is too important regeneration of a brownfield site that will help transform the St. Jude's area. From Gateway framework allows for 500 students' room as part of the regeneration alongside market and affordable homes. This scheme is for purpose-built student accommodation. Proposal also includes a new community space on ground floor, which is to be occupied with Al Basir Masjid Mosque, which supports plan application, and the representative will be here tonight. And also Bristol Home Youth Concern, who's also will be supporting as a local residents organization. This scheme includes extensive landscape that will bring welcoming public green space, office space for residents and students, with new roads around the site, including along the new riverfront walkway. So I'm supporting this again as other schemes application for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Yassin. The next statement is C2 from Rachel Allwood. Is Rachel here to speak?
Yep.
You've got 1 minute. Go ahead, Rachel.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Rachel Allwood, Planning Director at Dandara. We are proposing to build a new student accommodation building with a dedicated community space for the local mosque, along with a new riverside garden open to the public. Our proposal aligns with the Council's Froome Gateway regeneration strategy, which allows for 500 new student rooms. Our scheme would deliver 360 of those rooms. I'd like to thank Yassin, Mo and Kahil and all the other community leaders who have worked with us to ensure our scheme benefits as many local people as possible. This is our third major development in Bristol. We have already built or are about to start building a total of 750 new homes to rent, both market and affordable. We are committed to investing in Bristol and to helping deliver the homes, including affordable and student, that the city needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next one is C3, James Thomas. Thanks, James.
Good evening, councillors. I'm James Thomas from JTP, the architects on this application. Our proposal would transform this underused brownfield site into a welcoming, vibrant place with purpose-built student accommodation alongside new community hub and workspaces. The proposal has been shaped through extensive engagement with the local authority, residents and stakeholders. There's 2 pedestrian routes for local people to access the new green riverside gardens. There will be a series of high-quality landscape gardens, including decked walkways, a roof terrace for the students, and a sunken rain garden. The community hub is prominently located at the corner of Eugene Street and Little George Street, and it's been designed in collaboration with the local mosque to ensure it meets their needs. It's a car-free, highly sustainable scheme with new cycle routes and extensive cycle storage, which will achieve the BREEAM Excellent Sustainability Standard for student and will look to connect to the district heating network. Heights are varied and up to a maximum of 12 stories, but averaging out at 9 stories. And the architecture has been influenced by the colourworks that used to be on the site. Thank you.
Thank you, James. The next statement is C4 from Mo Ismail. Is Mo here?
Good evening, councillors. My name is Mohammed Ismail and I am from St. Jude's Al Basira Mosque. And we fully support this planning application. Many Muslims live in around St. Jude's for a long time, and we have needed more space for our growing community. The developer Dandara has kindly offered us to include a dedicated space for us inside the new building they are proposing tonight to build in Little George Street. This is exactly what the Froome Gate regeneration was meant to do, help local communities benefit directly. Our partnership with Dandara is a great example of this happening in real life. The community center will also give all students of all phases or none a chance to learn more about our culture and traditions. We believe this will help young people understand each other better, bring communities together, and bring a stronger and more respectful city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. And the last one is C5, Khalil Abdi.
Hello, good evening, councillors. My name is Khalil Abdi. I'm a director for Bristol Home Youth Concern, a non-profitable organization. And we support planning application, and our group provide a lot of service for the young people and their families, and in most deprived area in Bristol, including St. Jude. So we provide opportunity, sport, and spaces for the young people, safe spaces to come together, learn new skills, and build a teamwork together, and also create community cohesion. And this is where the Dandara comes. Dandara, we form a collaborative relationship with the Dandara team, especially Sue and her team, and we get a lot of support and supporting our initiative to the local coffee morning or the local activities for the young people. And the reason why also we're supporting is that also we welcome that the fact that Dandara has been working very closely with the mosque in St. Jude and provided with free community space as a part of its development proposal. It is extremely reassuring that during this time when there is a lot of deficiencies and a lot of in our society, that the business takes such a positive and proactive approach to ensuring that the benefit that comes with the investment and rejuvenation and share it with everyone. And that's why we are supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalil. That concludes the public forum for Alide High Service. So I'm going to pass over to Lewis for the officer presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. I feel like my colleagues have done an awful lot of heavy lifting for me, so if you'll forgive me, I'll whiz over the context relatively quickly and just sort of concentrate on the application in front of us. So we have a full application for PBSA, noting what Councillor Rushton has previously mentioned, for 360 beds plus some flexible ground floor use for community or for workspace. Just for those who are eagle-eyed, you might have noticed there's been a slight tweak to the description of development from what was in your original papers. Essentially, at the request of the applicant, we've added a phasing element to that description of development. It's not really material to the decision you'll make today. It's really just about the payment of SIL and how that works. So that's just to explain the slight change there. As I say, I'll whiz over these quite quickly, but this is the site which is directly adjacent to the Crown Sawmills site that you've just been considering. Currently, it's allocated for employment use, and it's also within the Old Market Neighbourhood Plan area. And then a few photos of the site, the fairly sort of low-slung industrial sheds, been used for a hire of industrial equipment. Site is relatively flat but does slope slightly down towards the Froome, but it's only sort of slightly perceptible. And just the bottom right photo there is the hostel, the Salvation Army hostel, which is on the other side of the site from the Crown Sawmill site. Whilst its current allocation is for employment, it is within the Froome Gateway Regeneration Area, which is covered by Emerging Policy DS5. I won't expect you to read all of that, but I've highlighted the bit that's probably most relevant to your decision today, is that Emerging Policy does set an expectation for a provision of 500 student bed spaces within the Froome Gateway area. As we sit at the moment, there are no bed spaces that have been provided, so this would be the first scheme to come through to provide student bed spaces. So on those grounds, we feel that it does accord with the emerging policy, and as you've heard previously, we feel we can give that quite a lot of weight in this case. Froome Gateway is divided up into different areas, and this is the Eugene Street character area, and this, as well as residential uses, also talks about ground floor uses, particularly cultural uses and workspaces, again in line with what you've heard, or what's being provided on the application site. Flood zone map, which you will be familiar with. This, I think it is 07. I can't quite, it's quite small on my screen, but this site is pretty much entirely within flood zone 3. The slightly lighter blue colour is flood zone 2, which is medium risk of flooding. But yeah, as we've previously sort of touched on, this area is liable to flooding. I'll talk a little bit about the Environment Agency objection in a moment, if you don't mind. So in terms of the scheme that's coming forward, I thought I'd just start with this. You see that in the report there's quite detailed comments from the highway officer, and we've been working quite hard with the applicant to try and provide as much of those highway changes to make this site turn this site from an industrial area into a more appropriate site for residential. And essentially those parameters have been set by us in terms of how that road links up with the James Street extension that the Crown Sawmills site will deliver, and then the Eugene Street extension, which is the lighter grey on this plan, will link with a potential pedestrian cycle bridge across the Froome, and this site will deliver that link. As before, the bridge is not part of the application. We're still considering the viability of delivering a bridge in that location, but this scheme makes allowances for it. So that's really set the parameters for the site in terms of what's the developable part of the site. Building itself is an H-shaped building. It's not very clear on this plan, unfortunately, but that space in the bottom right-hand corner is the community floor space. In the top right-hand corner is marked as workshop space, although it will be a sort of flexible E-class, which could be something like a cafe or something of that nature. Froome side walkway going through. We intend on securing the final landscaping details through condition, but this has been set so that the Environment Agency have access to the River Froome. We think that can be restricted a bit, and we can get a bit more landscaping in that area through condition. Proposed first floor, so this is the layout of the student accommodation. We've got sort of orangey colour, which are the studios, and then the sort of grey-blue colour are cluster flats. Cluster flats each have access to a kitchen sort of amenity space, and then throughout the scheme there is some sort of internal amenity spaces provided, and on the first floor that's sort of light purple. Goes up the building in very much that fashion. This is the 6th floor. I just included this because this shows access to a rooftop garden. And then we have the building, the design of the building. So that's from Little George Street. That's the view from the river. And then we have 2 side elevations there. Just in terms of flooding, how this site has been, it is probably simpler than on Crown Sawmills, but there is still a high risk of flooding on this site. But how this building has been designed is that essentially those 2 sort of purpley bits on that plan are designed as a raised slab with a void underneath. So the floodwater will travel underneath the void, and that will mean that essentially that will provide the mitigation to prevent the floodwater impacting on neighbouring sites. All of the residential accommodation will be above the design flood level, which is the level that it needs to be at to be safe in respect to the Environment Agency's concerns. And there is in this case an access out to the road, which will be reasonably dry in any flood conditions. The outstanding concern from the Environment Agency is it's a technical modelling point essentially, and it's to do with whether the modelling has taken account of all the necessary scenarios. So it's very complicated and very expensive to run modelling runs, as I understand it. But we've just asked them to essentially run another model, another run of the model to take account of all those scenarios. So we're pretty confident that it will come out that there is no impact on neighbouring sites. But as before, we're asking for delegated powers to approve the scheme once that issue has been sorted. Just a couple of more sort of illustrative slides of the scheme. So there it is in the context of the river. A bit more of a 3D illustration there. And I thought I'd just include this, which shows it a little bit in terms of the sort of existing and the emerging context. And you'll see there the neighbouring site, which is in the sort of beigey colour, which you've just resolved to grant permission on. Current application and sort of pinky colour is we're currently considering. The yellow is essentially approved development, and the sort of grey colour is another scheme which is at pre-app stage, but that's quite a long way off, so I won't worry too much about that one. But it does show you all the other schemes that we are considering in that area at the moment. And just as a sort of final sort of conclusion, I've just sort of listed what I think the main considerations are, and whether we think this scheme passes, or and how much weight I think should be given to those schemes. It's pretty green, I think, so that's positive. The only potential issue on that slide is the scheme is slightly higher than the parameters that are suggested in the development brief, but as you will have discussed earlier, that is only guidance, and actually this one is pretty close to what the development brief expects anyway. Maximum height is 12 stories, by the way. I probably didn't say that, but it's 11 plus 8 ground floor. And finally, heritage impacts neutral. We're happy with the amenity impacts. Climate change performs well, transport performs well, biodiversity performs well. The red issue is flooding. We're confident that it can be resolved, but we do need to wait for the Environment Agency to comment. And just a couple of final things that were just to bring to your attention. The sill allocation from this site will be, depending on the uses of the ground floor, will be about 2.1 million. So that will be a contribution from sill. I've also been told by the applicant that they've had discussions with the Music Venue Trust, who objected to the original submission, and now I understand they're happy with the scheme, although they haven't sort of formally withdrawn their objection to us. But we're happy that the development takes account of the noise in an appropriate way. So, as I say, recommendation is delegate to officers to approve, subject to the Environment Agency removing their objection, and to negotiate on the 106 and the conditions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Lewis. I think I'm going to start by just asking for the health thing again. Sorry. Sorry. Could you just please just say one more time, Jim, there is a need for this, because if people watch one section of this meeting back, it's just important that we recognise it. The health implications of this in terms of provision. Sorry, Jim, but it is, yeah.
Well, I will go shorter this time. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Reddy. So, there is a health impact, or there is an impact on GP surgeries. We're not unsympathetic to the ICB. We just feel that it's quite difficult at the moment to secure planning obligations in the form of financial contributions, simply because the ICB aren't able to identify surgeries in the local area that they are looking to expand or increase capacity at, and at the moment they don't have any plans for a new surgery in the area that they can put down and show us. So they're really just asking for a contribution towards something broadly unspecified, which causes some angst with the SIL tests, which are what we're tested on when we have to, or when we seek planning obligations. I think that the longer term solution, or the potential longer term solution, is perhaps through some utilisation of the strategic SIL that the city collects. Obviously from the 3 developments that we've been hearing about this evening will all be paying in the region of £2 million worth of strategic SIL if they come forward. Other developments across the city all pay strategic SIL, and certainly the organisation, the council, is looking at the potential of through the strategic SIL allocation process, considering whether to apply some strategic SIL to the ICB as and when schemes come forward, such that they could make a drawdown in that respect. So I think that's perhaps the most pragmatic, or potentially the most pragmatic approach to dealing with planning obligations or with developer contributions towards the ICB as it stands at the moment.
Thank you, Jim, for the 3rd time. Very, very handy to have that on record. Zoe, you've got a hand up. Go on.
Yeah, much like your question, just wondering if Matt could once again reassure us that flooding is not something that we need to worry about.
Yeah. And we just get that.
Keep it as that. So I think, as Lewis alluded to, the flood risk issues on this particular site is somewhat more straightforward to deal with than the previous site that we've just heard about. So I would say I for one, am quite comfortable that the flood risk matters, although serious, have been responded to appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any other questions or clarification that we'd like to make? No, it doesn't have to be flood. It's anything. I think we've covered that.
I noted that this building is right next door to the, I'm going to get this wrong, I'm going to get it wrong. It's one of the few wet hostels in Bristol, and it's a very important function for our city, and it does a lot of help and a lot of good work. I worry that the function of the, what is the Salvation Army, thank you. The Salvation Army hostel is functionality might be impaired by the fact that we're having all these new developments on the back. There might be some, I don't know what. Have we actually consulted with them? Because there's nothing in the papers about the consultation or talking to them about the new building, only about the fact that it's bigger than that building.
So they were consulted, and they didn't make a comment on the application. I understand, as we've alluded to earlier, this area has been allocated for regeneration. There's been quite a lot of community involvement with that process through the Frome Gateway Development Framework and the work our regeneration team are doing. And they've been engaging quite strongly with local land uses and local stakeholders, is the word I was looking for, which I'm sure would have included the Salvation Army. I understand there may be sort of looking at there may be other issues with that site, but we've certainly had, there's been nothing to indicate that they've got any concerns with this development.
Okay, I've got one quick question, or point maybe. It is more of a question, I think, is that I note that this is very close to Wade Street, which I note from experience is quite confusing in terms of the way that the vehicle movements and walking and cycling movements occur. I don't think we can obviously be specific, but I assume that the applicant could look into Section 106 or Community Infrastructure Levy monies being used to fund changes to that, because obviously that's a significant, will be of significant use by the people who live in this development.
Yes, we've been asking for Section 106 contributions towards a swathe of measures actually around the framework area. So we're asking for contributions towards getting those designs drawn up and go through all the technical work, and then provide opportunities to bid for higher amounts of funding.
I do have one more question, which is, thank you for that, by the way. Sorry, yeah, that's great. And the other one that I had was music. The Music Venue Trust have put in an objection to this. I didn't quite understand that at all. Could you go into that a little bit more?
So their objection was made on behalf of the Jamjar, who you've heard from earlier today. Essentially, their objection was on the basis of the originally submitted noise assessment, which they didn't feel properly accounted for the activities that were going on at the Jamjar. So what happens when there's a noise assessment? Basically, somebody goes out and does a reading at various times, and that will give them the noise level that they need to take into account. And I think, as I understand it, the concern was that those times that those readings were taken were not at the worst case scenario, the noise that could be created from the jam jar. As a result of that objection, the applicant went back and reviewed their noise assessment. They benchmarked it against other development in the area, including the Globe House development, which is closer to the jam jar, and came up with new readings. And on the basis of those new readings, we're confident that the site will be protected and it won't impact on the viability of the jam jar or any of the other sort of any of the other uses in that area. And as I understand it, the Music Venue Trust has confirmed with the applicant that they're now happy with that. But as I say, they didn't actually formally withdraw their objection.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Lewis. Sibs and then Serena.
Yeah, this is just in hindsight in terms of past application and this application. Can I just get a sense of clarification around how a local lettings policy would work in this scenario? Because, not this scenario, but just in the scenarios of what we've had, because everything has been in the context of the local needs, the local needs, the local needs. But if there isn't a local letting policy, or in terms of ensuring that the local residents have got access to that development, how then are we able to support those local needs if there isn't something that is a policy within that?
Is that particularly relevant to this application?
Oh no, this is a student accommodation. I mean, there could be students, there's students in Lawrence Hill who would like to apply to stay in this accommodation, who knows? So you could take it with this application in mind, or you could answer with the other ones in mind. It's just a question.
I think you need to ask questions about this application.
This application. I'll pass on that one then.
Okay.
My other question on this one then in particular is that Fruitgate and Broadmead have both got public arts activation strategy. However, I haven't seen any of that, kind of design or that opportunity of where that will be. I can see the contributions towards public art, but is that really taking up the public art activation? Because that's within Fruitgate too.
So we do have a public art and cultural activation policy document which relates particularly to Broadmead and Froome Gateway, and our public art officer and sort of our cultural officers have been engaging with the developer to deliver that. As I understand it, the developer is receptive to that, and what we will do is we will secure a strategy through a condition. Ultimately, if the condition that comes forward doesn't support that, then we can reject the condition. But there will be a condition on there which requires them to engage with that particular policy.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Serena.
Just a question really about student accommodation numbers. I know this is in the framework as student use, but how close is it to other proposals that are coming forward for student accommodation? So I've got two questions around that really. So first of all would be around intensification of use, so too much of one use, not mixed use and too homogenous in one area. Conversely, what happens if the student accommodation bubble bursts? We're seeing fewer students coming through anyway now. What is the future for that development? And thirdly, sorry, I'm just going to sneak this in. I'm trying to ask this as a question, but it's been a long day. The other development, is the neighbouring development is built to rent, because there's nothing to stop that, is there, being rented out to students. So there is that risk, yeah.
So taking your queries in order, I think in terms of the sort of concentration of student uses, I suppose we take each application on its merits. So this is essentially the first one that's come forward, and at the moment the concentration of students in this area compared with the rest of the city centre is very low. There's essentially one other building which is under construction at the moment, which is a student block of about 80 units. I think that's the only one within about 200 to 300 metres of this application site. So the current position is that the concentration is very low. We will be seeing, or you will be seeing, or the committee, either yourselves or the alternative committee will be seeing future developments for PBSA that are likely to come forward in this area, and currently we're looking at an application just in front of the Cabot Gate car park for a scheme of 600 student beds. That's not in the Fring Gateway area, but obviously is quite close to this, and there may be other schemes coming forward in the area. We will assess those on their merits when they're come before us. So there will become a tipping point where the concentration becomes more of an issue. But at the moment, we don't feel it is. In terms of alternative uses, we do ask that developers develop their buildings to be reasonably flexible. As I understand it at the moment, there's no real fear in the market that these sites won't come forward for student accommodation. And yeah, the market is still pretty buoyant, but as you say, there has been a dip in sort of student numbers coming from abroad, and there will become a point where they are no longer viable. And I suspect they will stop coming forward at that point. But the schemes are sort of designed to be flexible, so there is a potential for it to be sort of converted into a residential use or similar use if that were to happen. And yes, I mean, students can occupy any residential development wherever you are in the city. I would suggest that the nature of the units being provided in student accommodation is quite different to the nature of the units that's being provided in the build-to-rent scheme, and I suspect they might be sort of priced out of that market, but they could occupy that. But that is the case of any residential development, really.
Okay, any more questions that anyone has, or should we move on to the debate? Let's move on to the debate. Anyone got anything they'd like to say? Richard?
In deference to Councillor Varney's plea, and in the interest of brevity, I believe this is a well-designed scheme which has been well consulted on, and it commands my full support.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else got anything they want to say about this application? Yeah, I saw Sibs, then Serena.
Yeah, I'd probably just echo the comments that we heard from the chambers, is that to have a scheme that is broadly supporting minoritized communities to have a space and confirm that early in the day, and actually work with the community to ensure that is the case. I think is a good case of what we should aim to see. Not just that it is more about community use, but the diversity of access and opportunity to building is really the part that I fully encourage, and I support this application on that basis. Not only is it just a cafe, it's more within as a mosque space, a press space. So the space is intentional, and it's also within a student accommodation. So, really bringing cohesion at the heart of it, within the heart of the design and the delivery. That's something I haven't seen in many developments. I'd wish to see something that enables such cohesion to take place. And this kind of stands as a strong testament in everything that we've experienced this year. This application shows that there is hope.
Thank you, Sibs. Serena, you want to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. Echo what you're saying, Sibs, and applaud that aspect of it. It's so important at the moment, especially the events the last week or so are tremendously important. My only comment would be is that I worry about the design again. I find it rather dismaying sometimes that design from all the buildings I'm seeing is very, very similar and doesn't seem to reflect Bristol architectural traditions or Bristol design. It almost could be anywhere, and I'm sorry if that sounds offensive, but I do think we need to look in the future for more local design or more localised design, which is characteristic to Bristol. But generally, I think it's a reasonable scheme.
Can I say something first? Is that right?
Yeah.
And then we'll come to that. Yeah, I just want to echo what others have said. I do think it's a good scheme. I find that again, the Froome Gateway regeneration framework, it's higher than what it says in there, and I find that, frustrating. But I get why that's not on balance a reason to refuse. I'm pretty positive about it. There you go, Richard. Go ahead.
Chairman.
Thank you, I'll second it. Don't know why we need to do it that way, but okay. Say 5 seconds, I guess. Let's go around and take votes. I've randomised it again, although I did note that this is starting with the same council did last time, but it is still random. Councillor Varney, are you in favour?
It's a fix. Yes, 4.
Councillor Eddy. Councillor Breyer, that's me, 4. Councillor Hornchin.
4. Oh.
You're right. 4. Councillor Shabalala.
4.
Councillor Durston.
4.
Councillor Ralston.
4.
Councillor Peat.
You need a better randomiser, but 4.
And Councillor Freeman.
4.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That is granted then. And I should just say what the date of the next meeting is. It's scheduled to be held at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, the 28th of January 2026 in the Council Chamber, which is here. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and have a very good festive period.